So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can put a vintage 1980s VHS effect on your videos like this, just using Premiere Pro. And I'm also going to show you how you can take footage that you shoot with your contemporary digital camera or even your phone and add a retro 16mm film look like this. And I'm going to do this in two ways. Firstly, I'm going to show you a pack of motion graphics templates that I've made and that you can download, where all you need to do is drag and drop your footage into the media replacement window and it will add these emulations. But if you don't want to download the pack, don't worry, because I'm then going to show you how you can create a VHS effect yourself just using the native effects in Premiere Pro, without having to download or install anything. No plugins, no overlays, no hopping over to After Effects. These are the timecodes on the screen now, if you want to jump straight to any section of this video. Otherwise, here's a quick preview of what this asset pack can do. So just a quick bit of housekeeping before we start. Please make sure you have the latest Creative Cloud version of Premiere Pro if you want to use these. I built them on version 15 of Premiere Pro 2021 and that was build 41. So please make sure you have at least that version, or preferably whatever the latest version is, because we're on Premiere Pro 2022 now as I make this video. So if you have Premiere through a Creative Cloud subscription, you should just be able to run an update if you're not already on the latest version. When you download this pack, you'll get this folder. Inside are 5 more folders. The MoGarts folder, this is the main one. This contains 34 MoGarts or motion graphics templates files. You also get a fonts folder. These are a few fonts that I created that the MoGarts use. Make sure you install these first so that the MoGarts aren't missing fonts when you try to use them. You get a LUTs folder. This has 2 LUTs in it, and these are used for the 16mm emulations. More on these later. They're not designed for use on their own. You get a music folder. This has 19 music tracks in it, and this is a mixture of some retro incidental music and short stings for idents or whatever you want to use them for. These are completely royalty free. Use them on whatever project you like. The only thing you can't do, as with all the media and templates in this pack, is sell them on. And lastly, you get a sound effects folder. This is just a handful of sounds that I've sampled, like some VHS ambient tape hum, etc. So the MoGart section of Premiere has got a lot more advanced since my last pack. They are so much easier to install than they used to be. Now you just select them and drag them into your Essential Graphics window, and there they are. Thank you, Adobe. That is so much more helpful than the way it used to be. Brilliant, good job. So once you've installed these, they should all be in your Essential Graphics window here. If you make sure Browse is checked, they should all be down here. Here they all are. They all start with JWHD-VHS. So we'll grab this home video version 1 here and simply drag it onto our timeline. Basically now that's on your timeline, very, very simple. So I'm going to go to a clip and I'm going to take a clip. There's a clip of a boat here that I've got just going down the river. So I'm going to simply drag this clip into the Essential Graphics window. And now we've got our boat there, looking very VHS-like. You can do things like turn the initial static on and off. So maybe you don't want that little flicker at the beginning. You can turn that on and off with these little checkboxes here. You've got this text on here. You can edit that. You can make it say something different. Just write hello there. And you can turn that on and off if you want. You can have no text on there at all. You've got these 4x3 borders, but you can turn those off, and if you notice the text moves when you do that. You can change the amount of distortion, so you can make it a much more distorted video. You can obviously go to your lumetri color as well, and you can, do things like pull the highlights down, pull the whites down, maybe put the highlights up, shadows down. And obviously you can drag anything in here. You can drag another clip in. You can drag whole timelines in if you've got those, or you could put this clip of a peacock in. So the one thing this does do, unfortunately, is you do lose your audio. It's a fairly easy fix. What you do have is a VHS sort of hum in the background there. What you can do is just open this in your source window, and you can just drag your audio down, and then you can have your audio there too. These VHS templates come in a whole range of different severities. I've got this very warped one here. If I put that on, if I click this, I'll go to edit, you'll have the replacement window. What I want to do is I will grab this peacock video again, and now we can see it's all looking very warped and wobbly. Or I've got an even more severe one. I've got an unstable video one. I can drag this on, and if you're in browse and you click the actual video itself, it should take you to edit, or just click edit manually, and that's where you get the window to drop your video in. So I'm going to drop the peacock clip in again, and here we can now see that this is extremely wobbly and unstable. Actually, I'm going to turn the video distortion up full. We should have some crazy, really unstable video. So as I say, you've got a load of different ones. You've got ones with titles on, you've got ones that spin in, you've got ones where you can sort of see the CRT pixels. Let's try one with the title. I'll show you how these work. So I've got this one, title over video here, and I'm going to drag this clip of some bikes in. And what you can do is you can set an in point. So I'm going to set the in point just here by pressing I, and then when I drag this in, it will start at the in point. So what we've got here is we've got a load of controls to control the templates. So I can turn the 4x3 borders on and off again. I can change the font here, so I'm going to change it to Euro style, which is a nice, very retro font. There we go. You can change stuff like the tracking, so I can pull the letters in or out, change the leading. You can change what it says, and I can change the case of that. Maybe I might change the font again, maybe. Yeah, I quite like this very simple Helvetica style one. Not Helvetica, but style. So I'm going to make the type bigger, track it out a little bit, and the leading needs to come out. Y-axis just up slightly. But what I can also do here is, now I've changed the font and got this to my liking, I can change the point where it comes in. So I'm going to say it's going to come in, I like the point where 1 second, that's fine. 1 second speed to fade in, or maybe we'll say it's going to take 2 seconds to fade in, and it's going to start fading out after 6 seconds, and it's going to fade out over 3 seconds. So let's see how that looks. So these timing controls were something that is a big update from the last pack. You didn't have this sort of thing in the last pack. This one is a lot more sophisticated. The main thing though is the media replacement. Talking of media replacement, let me show you my favourite media replacement, because it's not actually the VHS one that I absolutely adore here. It's the 16mm film emulations. So I've gone for a sort of a 70s one and an 80s one and a slightly sort of cleaner 80s one. So I'll start with the 70s one. So basically, this is your footage without anything on it. This is basically what it does to a still image. So let's get the peacocks again, drag that in. Then we've got a sort of 16mm film look of these peacocks, but this is where the LUTs come in, because sometimes these on their own aren't enough. So I'm going to go to my lumetri color, and you want to go to the creative tab, not the basic, creative, because then you can change the intensity of the LUT. I'm going to browse for a LUT. So film 1 is a bit more cooler in temperature and a bit more contrasty. Film 2 is slightly less contrasty and tonally a bit warmer. Film 1 tends to go better with the 70s one, Film 2 tends to go better with the 80s one, but it kind of depends on your footage. So I'm going to try Film 1 here, and yeah, that's worked quite well. If you can see, if I turn the intensity off and on, you can see what that's doing there. And I go back to the essential graphics. Maybe I'm going to change the temperature a bit cooler, put the film dust up full, a bit more grain, got the faded look here. So that looks very, very 16mm to me. And what's great about this is you can do it for other things as well. You can put it on graphics or on stationary images, or, you know, just very simple titles you've made in Photoshop or something, and it makes them look really old. So if I have this simple sort of vector animation I've done, which is very kind of crisp and clean here, if I drag this into here, you have this really retro looking animation that looks like it's out of some sort of 1970s science program for schools or something. So probably my favorite of the 16mm ones is the 80s one. I find it slightly more versatile, and it's sort of got a slightly cleaner look. So let's drop this video in here of some trams. It looks a little bit cleaner, as you can see there. I'm going to go to my Lumetri color, the creative, and I'm going to put LUT 2 on it. Now I'm going to go back to my edit panel in the essential graphics, and I'm going to change the white balance temperature, make it a bit warmer, put the film dust up. I'd love a bit of film dust. Make it a bit softer, a little bit faded. But also what you can do is you can go into your Lumetri color, and then you can do things like you can tint the shadows to a bit of a magenta or something. You can obviously like tweak this all to your preference, but you do have that basic film look there to work from. And here we've got our retro 16mm look. I'm really happy with this one. It just looks so authentic to me. What a lot of emulations tend to do when you buy them is they just tweak the colors and the curves and stuff. But what I've got here is I've got that kind of flicker and the slight kind of shift in white balance and the distortion and the warping and everything that you get with film. So all those little details kind of add that, just a layer of authenticity for me. So I'm really happy with these ones. You can tell, can't you? So it's not all just media replacement stuff. We've also got a load of idents. So I've got, I think, 12 idents here, and a lot of them come with music. Some of them come with just a bit of sound. Most of them are just sort of text and color changes and timing changes, things like that. But a few of them have some media replacement, but it's media replacement in a slightly different way. So let me show you. If I grab this one here, ident 8, and I drop it onto the timeline, what we have is this kind of very simple white and blue ident, but we have a logo there, and this is where media replacement comes in. So what we need here is a transparent PNG. So I've made one here of a VHS tape, and I'm just going to drag that in, and that's appeared there. So I'm going to go to scale to fit. For some reason when you do that, it still kind of crops it very slightly, so I'm just going to take that down by 1% to 30%, but then I'm going to scale this up a little bit there, and I'm going to change the text to say VHS assets. I'm going to change the background color to a maybe slightly brighter blue like that. So this video background opacity up here, this isn't about the opacity of the ident itself or the background. It's not about putting it over another piece of video and putting the opacity down so you can see the video underneath. What it means is basically how much of the sampled video you can see, because I took samples from all my old 80s videos that I had recorded. So I've used the sort of motion and distortion of those to affect the movement of the elements on screen, but the actual video itself can show through a little bit. Let's change the font. Let's make it a more video font. So let's go Euro style, because that is a lovely retro 80s font. Look how 80s that looks. And I'm going to move that up slightly. So I can do things like I can affect the tracking here. I think that's kind of good. The leading's not relevant because it's all on one line. So let's have a look at how that looks. Very, very retro that looks. So I've got a load of those idents, a load of different ones. There's some static, some overlays, rewinds, pauses, different text effects. Some you can control, like, you know, blinking speed, things like that, different static. Some of these old VHS warnings that you used to get telling you not to copy them, you can change the speed of that and the color and all that, fonts and all that stuff. But it's this media replacement thing that's really been the game changer for me. Being able to sort of just drag and drop stuff and have this really authentic VHS and 16mm looking emulations just straight in Premiere it's just really changed the way I work, and I'm so happy that Adobe has done that. So if you don't want to do the drag and drop approach by getting the Mogarts, what you can do is you can follow this tutorial and create kind of a basic version of this in Premiere Pro itself, just using the native features without any overlays, without any external kind of plugins, anything like that. No hopping over to After Effects, all done straight in Premiere. So let's get started. So before we start, I highly recommend that you have the Global Effects button handy in your toolbar. This means that you'll be able to switch off the effects, and it will really speed up your workflow if you want to be changing a mask or something. It won't be struggling to re-render the effects constantly. If it's not there, click this little plus and find it and just drag it onto this bit here. So let's grab a clip here. We'll use this boat. So if you're being a purist, it does help to change the aspect ratio to 4:3 because that was the format of VHS. But in reality, you're most likely to be working in something like 16:9. It doesn't really matter too much, but it's one of those things where every little detail helps. Okay, so you want to try to shoot your footage like VHS. You want to use features like zooming in and out. I mean, that was very popular back in the 1980s, and it's not something you see much these days. I'd also recommend that you don't shoot with too wide a lens, as VHS camcorders tended to be still fairly zoomed in at their widest settings. So let's look at some actual VHS footage and assess it. So this is some of my family videos from the 1980s. So let's look at the fundamentals of what gives it its look. So first off, the colours and the contrast jump out to me. They're quite desaturated, or at least it seems to not have that vibrancy range that contemporary video has. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my Lumetri colour settings. So I'm going to Creative, and my vibrancy I'm going to take down to -40, just to knock some of those very saturated colours out. It also appears to have kind of clipped blacks and whites. So I'm going to my curves, and I'm going to drag the white down to here and the black up to about here. So we've got a curve that looks a bit like this. What this does is it clips the whites here and it clips the blacks here, but it also eliminates the pure blacks and whites, and it leaves them a little greyed out. Because older CRT televisions couldn't handle 100% white very well. So I was always taught that to bring that down a bit because it tended to flare. So let's add to that a bit more by going to our basic correction here and completely pulling down the whites. So that's really starting to grey out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the highlights up to 100 to compensate for that. And I'm going to pull the shadows up maybe to about 50-ish. So this is regaining some of that brightness, but it's kind of still keeping those blacks and whites not too extreme. Nothing is set in stone here. Assess it on how your clip looks. The look of VHS video really varied dependent on many factors, so just use your own judgment. Use this tutorial as a kind of basics guide. So the next biggest thing that stands out to me is this simultaneous kind of softness and sharpness of the image. And what I mean by that is there's a lack of detail, but a heavy amount of digital sharpening added. So what's weird about VHS is that it's inherently a digital process, but it's recorded and stored on an analog media. So you get this strange mix of what is essentially the worst of both worlds. So I'm going to add a blur to this footage. I'm going to go over to my effects menu and look for blur, and I'm going to use a Gaussian blur. I'm going to drop that onto the footage there, and I'm going to make the blur about level 6 and repeat edge pixels and horizontal and vertical. So I'm also going to add a channel blur, which is down under obsolete down here. I'm just going to put this down here, and I'm going to change this to horizontal only. I'm going to change the red blurriness to about 15, the green blurriness to 5, and the blue to 10. And that's just going to give us a slight kind of chromatic aberration sort of look. Now I want to resharpen the footage. I'm going to do this with an unsharp mask. So let's search for unsharp mask. Get this and put this on here. And down in our effects controls, I'm going to change the amount to 80 and the radius is going to be quite big. So I'm going to put that all the way up to 10. There it is with it off and with it on. I'm working in 1080p right here. So if you're using another resolution, you might need to adjust those settings accordingly. So the next thing I'm going to replicate is that ghosting that you got. You kind of get a copy of the image or a couple of copies of the image sort of just going across the screen sometimes. So I'm going to do this by duplicating the video track. So in Premiere, I'm going to hold Alt or Option. I'm going to click the video and just drag it up to the next track. So then we've got a duplicate of it there. So now working on this duplicated video track, I'm going to go to my Gaussian blur. And I'm going to change the blurriness up from 6 to 15. Then I'm going to add another Gaussian blur to it. And down here, I'm going to change this all the way up to 50. And for this one, I want to turn repeat edge pixels off and make it horizontal only. And the reason I want to turn repeat edge pixels off is because it will make a hard edge when we see the edge of it, because we're going to move it in a minute. So I want to go up to my blending mode. I'm going to change this to luminosity. So now I'm going to go up to my position and I'm going to want to add about 200 pixels to the right. So 1160, and that's moving that across to there. And then the opacity, I'm going to want to turn way down. So to about 13. So you can kind of see this kind of ghosting here. If I turn that off and on, kind of get this ghosting effect, like a sort of another image of the boat kind of just floating there in the water. So next I'm going to tackle this flickery bit at the bottom here. Back in the days of CRT screens, they would cut off the edge because they'd all kind of be zoomed in a bit and it would vary from screen to screen. But now in the glorious days of digital, we get to see everything in its full glory. So you get to see all these little flickery bits at the bottom and all the bits you weren't meant to see at the edge. I'm going to do this by adding a wave warp, going back to the base layer and adding a wave warp. So turn wave warp. I'm going to put this down here. I want to change the wave type from sine to smooth noise. I want to change the wave direction from 90 to 0, so it runs horizontally, not vertically. And I want to change the wave height to 150. That's going to make the height of it a lot more. But because we've flipped it 90 degrees, the height is now the width, if that makes sense. So 150, that's going to make everything a lot more fuzzy along there. So the wave width, which is the height, I'm going to change 40 is probably all right. I might just change it down to 30. And I'm going to pin this to the vertical edges, which is the horizontal edges, if you know what I mean. And I'm going to set the speed to from 1 to maybe somewhere around 8. So that's now going to be doing some crazy stuff on here. But you don't want that on the whole video. You just want it on a tiny bit at the bottom. So we're going to mask it off. And this is where your global effects mute button comes in handy. I'm just going to turn this on so we don't have to worry about it re-rendering the effects. So I'm going to click this little square icon here, and that's going to enable me to make a mask for the wave warp effect. Now, the mask feather, I'm going to want to change to maybe 1. And then I'm just going to pull these edges. I'm actually going to just zoom out a little bit. I can pull these edges just so it's just along the bottom here. So we can't actually see that too well because it's on, because of the nature of the water kind of doing that anyway. So let's see if we can change the clip here. Maybe we'll change it to this shot of my daughter with a camera. So if you want to change a clip, you just select the clip, select where you want to drag it to, hold Alt or Option, drag it, and that will replace it. And I need to do the top one as well. So now I want to make some flickery noise and tints. So I'm going to create a new color matte. I'm going to make a 50% gray. And I'll just drop that down on a new track above our clips. So on this gray solid, we now want to add some color noise. So I'm going to go to my effects and add noise, noise and grain, noise. So I'm going to go to my effects controls, and the amount of noise I want to push up to 100%. And you want to use color noise, and in my lumetri color, I'm going to push the saturation up to 200. You want to go to your scale now, and you want to uncheck uniform scale, because I want to stretch this, but I don't want to stretch it equally. So the height, I want to make about 200%. But then the width, I want to make 600%. So it's going to kind of be stretched out. So So I go to my effects and I want to search for a blur. A Gaussian blur will do again. And I'm going to put that up to around 15 or 16. I'm actually just going to move the Gaussian blur up underneath the lumetri color, or on top of it, rather, I should say. The lumetri color's on top. It goes from the top down. So now we've got this crazy kind of flickery color. So I want to change the blend mode to soft light on here, and I'm going to change the opacity to about 60%. So now we've got that flickery light all over it. So now I'm going to add a little bit of a blue tint just to the top of this video here. So I'm going to go to another color matte, and I'm going to make this a sort of bright blue. I'm going to call this blue, drag this on top here. I'm going to just move this up to the top, about here. I'm going to put a Gaussian blur onto it. So in my effects controls, I want repeat edge pixels off. I'm going to put the blur to 150. And I'm going to change the blend mode to hue, which is down the bottom here. So you've now got that, if I turn that off and on, you've got a little bit of color creeping in at the edge there. You used to get all this sorts of stuff with VHS. What I want to do now is create a kind of wobbly effect to the actual footage itself. I'm going to do this by creating an adjustment layer. Use a new adjustment layer. So what an adjustment layer does, if you don't know, is that any effects you put on it, it will affect everything kind of below it. So you don't apply it to specific layers, it's just going to affect the whole lot. So on my adjustment layer, I'm going to go back to wave warp. I'm going to put a wave warp on here. I'm going to want to change it to smooth noise again, and I'm going to set the height to only around 5 this time, and the width I'm going to put to 500, and the direction 0, so it's horizontal again, and the wave speed I'm going to put to 30, and I want anti-aliasing high. So now we've got that kind of wobbly effects that sort of slightly unstable video had. So that's basically about it. If you want to tweak it a bit more, you can do things like you can go to your lumetri color, you can tweak it a bit, maybe pull the saturation down a bit more. Maybe I'm going to change the white balance a bit. Maybe I'm going to up the contrast slightly more, pull the blacks down slightly. So I've added these 4x3 bars here by just adding a crop effect to the adjustment layer and cropping the right hand and the left hand side by 11%. I've also made the edge feather about 8 pixels. So there we have our Premiere only VHS effect, without any plugins, without any overlays. And of course, now we've got this, we can Alt or Option drag new clips into the first 2 layers of this one, and the effect will be applied to those new clips. So you could maybe save this as a template and then bring it out every time you wanted to create a VHS effect for your footage. If you do choose to purchase this pack, I want to thank you very much for supporting my channel. This is basically how I fund these videos and support my family, so I really am very grateful. And if you want, you can tag me in things you do with them, put them online, or hashtag JW Assets. I do love seeing what creative things people use my templates and presets for. I have more videos in the making at the moment, so watch this space. Take care, be kind to people, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.